Okay, so let's get started and have a look at our first few intervals that we're going to learn to recognize. I've tried to make it as simple as I possibly could. So if you're a complete beginner, you've never thought about intervals before, you've never thought about ear training before, you've never thought about music before, it's probably fine. We're just going to start as simply as we can because I think all people in the world can do this with a little bit of practice. I think there is nobody listening to this video who will not be able to learn to recognize the difference in pitch between an octave, so this is the interval of an octave, and the interval of a perfect fifth. And that's what we're going to be doing in this first part. What does an octave sound like and what does a perfect fifth sound like? Well, let's have a listen to both of those. So first of all, here is an octave. And by the way, to start with, again, to make it easy, all of the things that you're going to hear, both in these videos and also on the interactive exercises on my website, daveconservatoire.org. If you're listening to this on YouTube, you are missing out massively because I'm building a complete set of interactive exercises so that you can practice as we go along. So for goodness sake, get off YouTube and come over to Dave Conservatoire where we can practice together and you can actually see your results and see your skills develop, which hopefully will be really exciting. So anyway, octave, perfect fifth. Here we go. So here's an octave. That's the interval we need to start to recognize. People approach this in different ways. I'm going to try something a little bit experimental. Sometimes people tell you, oh, well, octave's really easy to recognize because it's the beginning of Somewhere Over the Rainbow. Somewhere over the rainbow. Easy, right? Well, yeah, that's okay, and that sometimes will work. But sometimes, you know, an octave's going to not be quite like that. It's not going to be the first and second notes of a melody. It might be somewhere else. So better than that, and hopefully why the internet is so great and why this is so exciting is that I can really show you the sound, get you to practice it, and I don't need to teach you a trick to kind of help you to work it out. Instead, we can just learn it together and we can learn really truly what it sounds like, not via a trick. So what does it sound like? Well, to me, because this is a C down here and this is a C up here, we're kind of talking about two versions of the same thing. It's a C, both low and high, but obviously they're an octave apart. So the higher one is maybe a little bit clearer, a little bit crisper, maybe a bit cleaner, but it's not anything different. So there's nothing particularly different going on here. That sounds to me basically like two flavors of the same thing. Now, to start with, all we need to do is be able to work out when we hear that and when we hear something that is not that. So we're going to contrast that with this thing called a perfect fifth. And again, if the interval terminology, perfect fifth, octave, all of that stuff is a bit confusing, do go and check out the theory videos that I've already made on intervals where all of that will be made very clear. But we're just trying to compare this octave sound to the sound of a perfect fifth. I'm just going to play them a few times because the whole point of this process is just to get those sounds into your head, and they won't come straight away, but hopefully you'll be able to right away hear that there is some kind of difference between these two sounds and these two sounds. Again, if you're looking for a familiar melody that starts this way, Star Wars does. By the way, if you're looking for a familiar melody that starts this way, well, Star Wars is a really good example. But again, I try and not use that unless you have to. Instead, really try to just get that feel for what a perfect fifth sounds like. Again, here's our octave. And here's our perfect fifth. Now, the interesting thing about ear training is that I can't really tell you all that much more about recognizing these two intervals. Instead, what I'm going to do is send you away to practice. So the exercise that comes next is all about working out if you can hear the difference between an octave and a perfect fifth. And I hope over time, with a bit of practice, it may not come straight away, you'll start to see there is quite a difference between those two jumps in pitch, and you'll actually get pretty good at picking them out. So what I'm looking for before you go on to the next lesson and we look at another interval is to be able to get 10 in a row right. So when the exercise said you've mastered this skill, it's time to move on and we'll add in another interval to the mix.